Greetings, my name is Robert Long. I'm the curator of the DeSoto County Museum, the award-winning DeSoto County Museum in Hernando, Mississippi. And we welcome all of you viewing this broadcast to our 2022 annual meeting. And our special guest today is author Joy Lucius. Joy, we are thrilled to have you.
I'm honored to be here.
You have created quite a buzz of excitement with your book. And her book is, and I will kind of hold it up here, but it is Priceless Pennies, Rose and Odette. And I'm familiar with those names because they were playing and play on our constant loop of all of the children who lost their lives during the Holocaust.
This is exactly where the book started.
And that thrills me because we do get visitors here from all over the world. And you're from Tupelo.
Tupelo, Mississippi.
Which is just right down the road. And Joy, I'm going to let you tell us about coming to the museum, viewing the Unknown Child exhibit, and how it profoundly touched your life.
It really did. I work with AFA Ministry in Tupelo, Mississippi. And in June of 2019, Diane McNeil came and did a presentation for our ministry, and then I had the privilege of interviewing her. And you know that Diane is just so full of energy, and she loves Unknown Child Foundation, and she loves the DeSoto County Museum. So her first item of business was, you have to come visit us. And so we made plans for about 3 weeks later to come visit DeSoto County Museum. In the meantime, I began to do some research on the Unknown Child Foundation and on the 1.5 million children of the Holocaust. And honestly, the first picture that I really found in my research was this picture of these two beautiful little French sisters.
And let's hold that up again, because I think it personalizes, if we can, Rose and Odette. Now,
this is Rose.
This is
the
Rose.
Elder, and this is Odette.
And their last name is?
Abalafia.
Abalafia.
And I probably pronounced that wrong, but I did my best.
Absolutely. So continue. You came here, and what you heard the names
it was
of the two sisters?
This picture just stayed in my heart, and so I researched. But I could not get away from this picture. They look nothing at all like my sister and myself. But all I could see when I looked at that picture was my little sister. And so I could not imagine living my life without her. And luckily, when we did come visit, she lives in the area, and she came with me for our tour. And so the day that we toured, you, Diane, Susan Powell, and I also believe the architect,
Mr. Doug Thornton. That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
He, you gave us a tour, and we felt like we had the royalty tour. And we finished the tour, and we were standing at the end, and Susan said, "We forgot to turn the sound system on." And at that point, y'all kind of talked, and they were like, "Well, it's really a moot point at this time." And you explained to me that it was a ongoing soundtrack of the names of 300 of the children of the Holocaust, and their names are just solemnly spoken as people tour the exhibit. And Mr. Thornton said, "Let me go get the recorder and let you hear a section." So he did, and we waited and chatted, and I could see him in the hallway trying to get it to work, but it never would. And he kind of sighed, and he walked back in to tell us, I'm sure it's not working. And at that exact moment, the recorder came on and said, "Rose Abalafia, 1932 to 1944, Odette Abalafia, 1936 to 1944. And I'm sure I scared y'all to death because I squealed and screamed and began to fumble in my purse, and my sister knew, so she helped me. And we got the picture out, and we showed you the only two names I heard that day out of 1.5 million were the names of two little girls that I had their picture in my purse. And so at that point, I knew that we had all been given the assignment to find out the story of Rose and Odette Abalafia. It took 2 years, but we did it.
Wow, and we might call that a God thing. You know, there is a spiritual component to this exhibit.
Yes.
We are sitting today in our Jewish history room.
Yes.
DeSoto County has rich history of immigrants to our area, including the Goodman family who were from
Yes.
Memphis or lived in Memphis, but spent about 30 years here in DeSoto County, for whom Goodman Road is named. So we have a companion piece to the Unknown Child Museum. And for our viewers, the Unknown Child exhibit, which is the brainchild of Doug Thornton and others with the Unknown Child exhibit, Diane McNeil, her husband Ken, Susan Powell, of course, a teacher, one of the early ones who got the little kids in our school system understanding about the Holocaust as you can in kind of measured terms with children. The fact that 1.5 million precious young lives were lost.
How do you measure that?
How can you? How can you? And they came up with the idea of this penny project, which, you know, in today's world, a penny is cumbersome. Who wants to keep up with pennies? You have to have them rolled up, and the bank really doesn't even want them. And they stood in or symbolized the children of the Holocaust who were, in the eyes of the Third Reich, just throwaway children. Disposable, exactly. And so Susan Powell speaks very eloquently about the fact that if you see a penny in the street, pick it up, because it symbolizes to her, and she'll never look at a penny the same way ever
Me
again.
either.
It symbolizes to her those children who were lost. And not just the children, but the adults they could have become, and the whole lives that were just snuffed out. And it really profoundly touches everyone, regardless of their faith. And here in the Jewish History Room, we celebrate the fact that the Judeo-Christian shared faith has really shaped society in many ways. Love your neighbor, honor your mother and father, all of these things that we talk about that are really the architecture of our society can be found in the Jewish scriptures. We have a Jewish prayer book here. We have a shofar, a menorah or a Hanukkah. We have artifacts from the Dead Sea Caves in this room here. And this gentleman looming over my shoulder here, Elvis Aaron Presley, who, it might surprise a great many of our viewers, has Jewish ancestry.
Yes, he does.
And his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who helped most of his career, but at the same time did not really want that to get out because of the anti-Semitic bigotry and sadly the prejudice against the Jewish people that has been a factor that the Jewish people have had to live with for most of their life. As we learn from world history, the Jewish people were scapegoated, blamed for everything, and the result was, during the Holocaust, 6 million and then 1.5 million children whose lives were lost. Elvis knew of his Jewish heritage.
Yes, he did.
Gladys, his mother, was of Jewish ancestry, and if your mother is Jewish, then by all accounts, according to the Hebrew faith, then you're Jewish. And Elvis wore a Star of David and a cross. Elvis's father was a Pentecostal Christian. And Elvis, of course, a very spiritual person. His Grammy that he won was for his gospel music. But Elvis was indeed one who studied the religions of the world. He was a very spiritual person, a very charismatic person. And Tupelo has a very rich Jewish history. I did not really realize that, with the exception of one of the heroes from my childhood, Jack Crystal, the voice of the Mississippi State Bulldogs, was very faithful to attend temple, and he was a dear soul to many of us and talked often about his faith. And so there is this connection, this nexus between the faiths. Now, the Unknown Child exhibit, the plans are, why Elvis is kind of hovering over us here, to expand the Unknown Child exhibit. Very exciting. On the Circle G Ranch, Elvis Presley bought a ranch here in 1967. Behind us, we have some artifacts and memorabilia celebrating that fact. Elvis, of course, being Elvis, gave ponies to the local children and cars and bought cars from the local dealerships. He was a presence in DeSoto County for the years that he was here, on the weekends primarily, to ride his motorcycles and his horses. But the idea is at the Circle G Ranch to have this unknown child exhibit in an expanded form that architect Doug Thornton has,
beautiful,
with AERC, has worked very diligently and creatively to bring to life. A lot of effort and time has gone into that, and it would be a permanent memorial.
Yes, it will be
for the children of the Holocaust,
and it will be a permanent memorial to Elvis and his family. And of course, we are from Tupelo, and I find it very appropriate that someone from Tupelo came here and learned about DeSoto County Museum, and now I get to be a part of that dream.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's amazing that when he bought that land 57 years ago, I cannot imagine that he ever thought that it would become such a memorial to his mother's family and to their faith.
Isn't that wonderful? Again, a God thing, we might say, that how things develop naturally, and it's just a blessing. It's a blessing to us. We literally get people here at the DeSoto County Museum and to tour the Unknown Child exhibit from all over the world. Peru, Argentina,
That's
Colombia,
amazing.
New York, Israel, and I credit Diane McNeil, and we're going to hear from Diane in another segment. But Diane, of course, was a driving force and has been a driving force for this exhibit as well. So sometimes things take time.
They do.
And I know
but it's usually the perfect time.
It is the perfect time, absolutely, for this to transpire. Now, the research for the book. Can you share with our viewers about the research for the book?
The research was very trying. I love research. I'm a retired public school teacher. I taught in Mississippi schools for 23 years. Everyone in my father's family, we're all teachers. And so I love research. I taught English, literature, and creative writing, so I thought I was pretty good at research. But as I began to research, almost instantly, I discovered that Rose and Odette and their mother and their father had been murdered at Auschwitz, and they actually came in on a very famous transport. It was one that was discussed in the Nuremberg trials because there was a famous orphanage that was a part of that transport. So there was live testimony given that the people from that transport were immediately, except for one woman who spoke 5 languages, and she was saved to be an interpreter. She told the story of how they were immediately unloaded from the cattle cars with dogs barking and screaming and just absolute terror, and they were marched straight to the gas chambers and murdered. And so I was at a loss because I thought, well, here's the story, but it's not a story. It's a story that 1.5 million children experienced, but I don't see the book. I don't see the story. So I put the research on hold for the holiday season, and I told my boss, I work for AFA Journal, which is now The Stand, and I told him, when we come back for Christmas, if we don't find any new information, we're going to have to let this go because there's no information. So the day we came back, we were all so excited, turn the computers on, see if there's any information. And sure enough, someone had posted online another picture of Rose and Odette with their name underneath it. So I emailed this man who is a very prestigious businessman in Paris, and I emailed him a very terse email and just said, I'm doing research on Rose and Odette Abalafia. Do you have any information? He sent me an equally terse email that said, yes, they were my aunts and they were murdered in Auschwitz.
Wow.
And I thought, no, they can't be your aunts. The entire family died. But over the course of the last year and a half, he and I have gone on a journey together via email during the pandemic.
All right.
And actually, they had 2 older brothers, David and Leon, but they were secreted out of Paris in the bottom of a garbage truck. Can you imagine wanting to be safe and have your children saved and free? And can you imagine being so desperate that you would allow the Salvation Army and the Boy Scouts were the 2 groups that helped, Imagine having your children placed in the bottom of a garbage truck. Wow. They offered to save Rose and Odette, but their mother, Victoria, knew that Odette could not do it. Mm-hmm. And so she stayed with her girls. And as we researched, his father, talk about perfect timing for us, mm-hmm. his father had died in October, and during the holidays, he cleaned out his father's house and found a suitcase. And in the suitcase there were documents, there were pictures, and there was a whole story about a family he really never knew about. He told me at one point, Joy, all I ever knew in my entire life, we would walk into our home, and on the foyer table there was this picture, and there was a picture of my grandparents, and my dad would say, those are your grandparents, those are your aunts. And wow. He said, that's all I ever knew. Mm-hmm. So he began to piece this story together. He would go on adventures for me and take pictures. And one day he emailed me and he said, I can't decide if I want to cry or scream, because today I went to take pictures of their home that we found, the address. And he said, as I got there, I realized I'm standing in front of an apartment building that I visited with my family every week of my life because my parents' best friend lived here. Mm. Never once did my father say, there, son, that's where I lived before the war. Never once. Wow. And so it has been a journey for he and his brother and their children, and it's definitely been a journey for us. And we feel like they're such a part of our family. And in fact, when the pandemic and everything is over, he wants to come to DeSoto County Museum, and he wants to see the exhibit for himself.
Oh, fantastic.
And he wants to learn about the history of his family and the history of Jewish families here in Memphis and in DeSoto County and in Lee County and Tupelo. So we're just so excited, and I'm just honored to be able to tell the story. And Susan, of course, is a part of the book. Sure. Because you can't tell the story of Priceless Pennies without the classroom in which Susan... Absolutely. So it's really a neat story. It's a dual fictional story for young people, and there are two storylines. One is very real. It's all the information that their nephew found me, and it's their story that we had to dig and find. Mm-hmm. But the other story are two imaginary girls from Northeast Mississippi who have a priceless penny project, much like the one that Susan gave her children. Right. And they just accidentally get Rose's name as their project subject. Wow. And so their names are Tori and Tilly, the imaginary girls, and they go through very much the same process I went through of struggling to find the story. But it comes together, and in the process, two sets of sisters, separated by 80 years, realize that they have so much in common. And that's the whole story. I mean, we're all connected. Mm-hmm. There's no value that you can place on one life compared to another. Absolutely. And we lost 1.5 million children. And so many times I think of what are the things that they could have done, that they would have done. Cure leukemia, cure the coronavirus. Sure. I mean, we don't know what we lost, but we do know that we lost 1.5 million precious souls, and Rose and Odette are just two of them. Right.
How wonderful you give voice to their story and to their suffering, and just a beautiful book. And Joy, how can they purchase your book if they'd like to buy your book?
They can go to afaresources.net, or you can just go online and Google Rose and Odette by Joy Lucius, and you'll find the link to purchase it. And I believe y'all keep some here.
We do, and for people that come in to the museum, we try to give everyone a royal tour. I know you say you get a royal tour, but we really do try to give that personal touch and perspective, and that is what history affords us, is perspective.
Yes.
And I was speaking to a group yesterday, and sharing that with them, that we learn from the mistakes of the past, and if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat them. And so this terrible episode in world history, God forbid, but conceivably it could happen again if we don't learn from the lessons of the past. And so the book is just truly phenomenal. Joy, it's just been an honor to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
And we encourage all of our visitors to the DeSoto County Museum to please come by. We are located at 111 East Commerce Street in Hernando, right off the interstate, exit 280.
Yes.
We're very easy to find right past the railroad tracks. We're expanding and growing here at the museum. Our annual meeting kind of takes stock of that. And so we really appreciate all of those who've contributed. We have a
Yes.
great number of individuals who help keep the museum going, and there are great plans ahead for the Unknown Child Museum to come in its expanded form. So this has been just a joy, if I can say, a joy and a pleasure, Joy.
Thank you so much.
To have you with us here today, and we hope to have you back, perhaps have an autograph signing.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And one reason we're coming to our viewers on our annual meeting is because of the pandemic. But what a great way, and where one door closes, another door, as
That's
we know,
correct.
always opens. But truly, it's a pleasure to have you here. So once again, we thank you all for tuning in. We will continue with our annual meeting. In just a few moments, we have another special guest
Yes.
that will be making an appearance. And so, Joy, we bid you not farewell, because we know you're not far from here, but you certainly have a welcome place in our hearts
Thank
and in
you.
our museum each and every day. Thank you for joining us as we go through the Unknown Child exhibit inside the DeSoto County Museum. We're standing here at what I call the map exhibit here. When I began my tenure here at the DeSoto County Museum and began to explore the horrors of the Holocaust, personally, I had no idea there were this many concentration camps. Like many, I thought, well, maybe 4, 5, something. But my goodness, apparently, Nazi Germany in the 1930s began planning all of this mass extermination that they planned for the Jewish people. So as we can see, there were many concentration camps. Morris Casey, who is from Walls, Mississippi. Morris Casey was a young soldier who would help liberate those terrible camps at Auschwitz. And a matter of fact, he is the impetus for this particular exhibit in here, as well as the inspiration from Doug Thornton, our architect, because Mr. Casey, being a soldier just doing his job, stumbled upon mass carnage. The children who were still living would be clinging to his legs. Just a memory that never left him. So he began about 70 years later, when he was getting close to 90 years of age, began to speak out to the school children of DeSoto County about the horrors of the Holocaust. And Susan Powell, who's one of our great teachers in our school system, began to speak to the children about the Holocaust, who really, the only knowledge that they had is maybe a paragraph, if that, in their school textbooks about the Holocaust. So they began to ask questions, and Mr. Casey was an invited guest and began to speak to the children. And before long, Ms. Powell embarked on the Penny Project, she and others, that raised money, raised 1.5 million pennies for each of the children. So get back here where you all can kind of see the maps a little bit and see the concentration camps. But it's really shocking and stunning, all of these concentration camps that were put in place in the late 1930s, and by 1945, 6 million would be exterminated, 1.5 million children. And so it's their memories that we seek to preserve and honor here inside the Unknown Child exhibit at the DeSoto County Museum. And as we take our walking tour, we're going to walk in the main part of the exhibit here in just a moment. The exhibit is open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 until 5 p.m. We enter through here, and of course this beautiful sculpture that you see here was designed by the sculptor Rick Weinecke. There's one in Israel, one in New York, and one right here in Hernando, Mississippi, just south of Memphis. So this beautiful sculpture here evokes a child, of course, at the point of their demise here on earth. But as you can see, the arm is reaching through to another realm, and a butterfly is pictured over here. Well, you can see it in this particular photograph, but you can't in the existing sculpture we have in here. The children who were captured behind barbed wire, they would see birds, they would see butterflies flying free, and it gave them hope that somehow they might be freed from the horrors of their existing circumstances as well. And as we go through, we see the mass rallies that were had in Nazi Germany that whipped up frenzy against the Jewish people. The Jewish people were blamed for everything: famine, the economy, everything. The Jewish people were the scapegoats, if you will, for the Nazi Germany regime in power at that time. We walk over here to the 1935 Nuremberg laws. These laws set in stone where Jewish people could go. Their property a lot of times was confiscated. A non-Jewish person would often run their company for them. They had to basically take a back seat, if you will, on public transportation. As a matter of fact, the Nazis later admitted their Nuremberg laws were based on the Jim Crow laws of the American South, and if you had a Jewish ancestor, of course, all the way back, and they kept the Nazi German regime was notorious for keeping excellent records, and they would trace if you had a Jewish ancestor and you were denied certain liberties. So it's really horrific, but it is part of our history, and again, we hope that history does not repeat itself, and that is something that I know that the soldiers like Morris Casey, deep in their hearts, hope would never occur. And as you go through, you see almost like a hologram. You see the images of the children. You see a penny. The photographs are faded on purpose because these precious children, the attempts were made to wipe them from the face of the earth, and yet here they remain. And so we honor them. We honor them. We actually, you go through, and this is designed to look like the ghettos in Warsaw and other places where the Jewish people were herded before they were loaded onto the cattle cars and taken to their deaths. The pogroms were some of the great ethnic cleansings that happened in Europe, in Poland and other places in the Soviet Union. And literally, Jewish people were driven from their communities, herded into these ghettos, if you will, and that was just the stage before they were herded onto the cattle cars and taken to the concentration camps. And then Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the night that the synagogues were burned and set ablaze, windows were shattered, storefronts were defaced. It was a night of terror, and Kristallnacht actually means the night of shattered glass. And it will forever be just a horrific memory collectively for the Jewish people. Items like this, they were told to get their belongings, not so that they would have clothing and necessities of the concentration camps, but that the Nazis would be able to go through their valuable things and sell them. It's just horrific that they had no idea. They were greeted with false promises that work will make you free, and of course many were taken directly to their deaths. And we talk about the killing fields that occurred in the attack on the Soviet Union. They would murder many East European Slavs and Jewish people as well. Gypsies and others were also affected by these mass killings. And the medical experiments, very sadly. The Jewish children were held out for very cruel and inhumane medical experiments that we read about today. The hope is that never ever will the world ever experience something as horrific as the Holocaust. Now, this is the crown jewel of the Unknown Child exhibit in Hernando. More than 36,000 pennies, part of the 1.5 million pennies collected to honor the 1.5 million children who perished during the Holocaust. And again, this beautiful, beautiful sculpture. And you see the butterfly. You see the butterfly in this beautiful bronze sculpture here. The butterfly symbolizes freedom. But you go through and you realize the enormity. And again, these are just 36,000 pennies here. But it takes your breath away, the scope and the breadth of the suffering that must have occurred during that time. This is the Unknown Child exhibit that is part of the DeSoto County Museum's temporary exhibit. It's been here about 3 years, and the plans are for it to be expanded at the site of the former Elvis Presley Circle G Ranch in the Horn Lake area. So we honor the efforts of Doug Thornton, the architect, and Diane McNeil and Susan Powell, and all of those who have given their time, their talents, and their energy to bringing this beautiful exhibit to life. Again, I'm Robert Long, curator of the DeSoto County Museum. We invite you to come by and see this really breathtaking, stunning, and profound exhibit that will change your life, along with the many other award-winning exhibits we have here at the DeSoto County Museum. We are located again at 111 East Commerce Street in Hernando, right off the interstate, exit 280. Please come and visit us soon.